Right, so we are about to begin. Good morning, good afternoon, good day to everyone joining us today. We welcome you to our webinar on Sport for All Diplomacy, contributing to strengthening global connections. My name is Fahmida Faiza, an international sport diplomacy specialist, and I will be moderating today's session. I'm very positive that you will enjoy today's program, as it has been carefully curated with a diverse set of speakers and panelists to give you different perspectives on our topic of discussion. Before we go any further, I would like to advise you that this webinar is recorded and it will be posted on Tafisa YouTube page and the Tafisa website. For all of you, the microphones have been muted by default to ensure a smooth running of the webinar. And we ask that you drop your message, comments, and questions using the chat box and the Q&A functions in Zoom. Finally, can everyone please share their name, organization, and country in the chat box so that we know who is joining us today and from where. As of now, I can see that the live participants are over 100, and we are so excited to begin our session. That's enough housekeeping for now. It's time to officially kick off the webinar. And now I'd like to start with our Impulse session with Dr. J. Simon Rofe. Dr. Simon is the Associate Program Director at Woolton Park and Associate Professor at International Politics at the University of Leeds. Dr. Simon has worked with numerous stakeholders from across the sporting and diplomatic realms, including UNESCO and UNITAR, foreign services, government agencies from around the world, anti-doping organizations, bidding and organizing committees. Known for his wealth of knowledge in research, policy, and practice, we are all excited to hear about his remark at the Impulse. Dr. Simon Rofe, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Fahmida, for that really generous introduction, and indeed to Tafisa for inviting me to join this conversation. I have the privilege to speak as the prologue, the warm-up act to some wonderful commentators who will come after me. So I will endeavour to be brief and set the scene in understanding sport for diplomacy for all. So let me share a couple of slides and we'll go from there. Okay. So it is, to say, a great pleasure to be here. And I'm going to skip through a few slides just to share some of the context, concept and practice of sport for all diplomacy and how we can strengthen global connections. So I'm going to look at this in 4 dimensions, not least because that enables us in the short time we have together to get to grips with some of the concepts that my colleagues will address later, as I say, as provocations, which I hope will stimulate some meaningful discussion and prompt some thoughts and application on your behalf, wherever you may be and however you engage with this process. So these 4 dimensions I want to immediately suggest are in motion. Sport is in itself perpetually in motion. Whether the ball stops, whether the race is finished at one point, there is always, to quote Cardinal Richelieu, a negotiation continua. There is always an ongoing process involved in sport as there is diplomacy. And these 4 dimensions split down, therefore, into 4 concepts and 4 practices. I'm going to dwell on this without overstating it, simply to allow you to read through the words that are on the page here, and we'll dwell on a little bit more detail in due course. But the interrelationship between concept and practice is at the heart of understanding sport diplomacy. That's because this is something that maybe a decade ago we wouldn't be having this panel with this title. Possibly even as recently as 5 years ago, it was still very much up for debate. And the context to this discussion would be, well, what is it and why are we talking about it? It is no little personal satisfaction, but that's not necessarily relevant. But it is definitely relevant that we have such a diverse group of people joining this discussion more broadly and on the panel here today that represent different constituents, different stakeholders, and indeed different contributors, practitioners to the sport diplomacy landscape. So these 4 practices and 4 concepts in a little more depth. But that comes with a professional health warning about definitions. I am, by my training, in large part, but by no means only, as I also have a foot in both the sort of coach developer and coaching camps, a scholar, an academic. And what we tend to concentrate on is words and definitions. So with that precursor, a definition or 2. Understanding diplomacy in 3 simple terms: about negotiation, representation, and communication. When those 3 things are in play, we can see that diplomacy is at work. And that means diplomacy is not restricted to ambassadors and embassies. It's part of our daily function in many regards. We can negotiate with the immediate context of the people around us, whether in a professional, personal, or familial circumstances. We are communicating every day, all of the time, and we are representing something, whatever that may be. Sometimes it's the institution you work for, sometimes it's the sport you participate in, sometimes it's your religious, ethnic dimensions that come to bear. Always we are representing something. It is the interrelationship between our different representations, our identities, that is to the fore. It is quite easy and straightforward in some senses within sport to think of representation as the badge on your shirt. That is one dimension. There are other identities at play, even for the athlete in that regard. A couple of pieces of seminal text. I doff my hat to many of the people on the panel, but also to my colleague Stuart Murray, whose book, Sport Diplomacy, Origins, Theories and Practice, is really a very significant part of that journey that I spoke of moving sports diplomacy from a what is it to how can we make it work conversation. And equally, some work that I was able to do with a number of colleagues here in this sport and diplomacy games within games. I share these not as any sense of self-aggrandizement, but simply to put that there is a conceptual background to this. Understanding, providing a little bit of space and time to think about how this operates. Very difficult when you're on the pitch, as it were, in the practice of sports diplomacy. But nonetheless, the benefit of doing this over the past 10 years is to share these moments. And so this longer definition, I did warn you about the health warning, is there to provide the navigation skills for practitioners to connect with and learn from different parts of this sportscape that I've described. And equally to allow for moments of critical reflection. Because you're there where individuals, groups of people, communities, teams, organizations, international governing bodies have the opportunity to see and reflect on their own practice and the way it can be enhanced. Looking at these practical dimensions then, sports governance, law and ethics, again, a whole panoply of different functions here. But what's important is to understand that they are impactful on the practitioners, both at the elite level and all the way down to the grassroots. Thinking about the consequences of sustainability and accessibility to sport for all. The environmental consequences of sport are not without consequence. We need to think about how we can maintain and enhance the way sport operates with its environment. The environment, for whatever reason, is changing, and sport needs to be able to adapt to that. We need to think about the athletes involved. It's often very straightforward to think about the high-profile athletes, the LeBron James, the Lionel Messi, the Cristiano Ronaldos in this. But athletes are all of us too, I suspect. Whether we are active or perhaps as athletic as we might like or might once have been, we are nonetheless athletes in this environment. And thinking about the whole context of that is a significant part of this discussion. Equally, we need to think about why, and indeed the reasons that we're here today on a Wednesday morning, at least my time. Sport has a huge convening power, huge convening power. We can see that in events, sort of opening ceremonies of Olympics and Paralympic Games, of course. But sport has always got a convening power. People will meet in familial situations in communities across the world on a Saturday afternoon to participate, often on behalf of family members, particularly intergenerational opportunities for parents to take children, grandparents to be involved. There is something about sport that brings people together. It has that convening power. And if that rests on the practical dimensions, thinking about the conceptual dimensions, Nelson Mandela articulated this well, and it's almost an impossibility to talk about this without using the great man's words. Sport has the power to change the world. But this needs to be thought about, not just spoken about. As I've suggested, it is a process of négociation continuelle, and apologies for my French accent, but it is ongoing. There is something dynamic, dramatic, and emotional about sport. It gets people's hearts racing in all sorts of ways. Sometimes there are consequences to that are not admirable. It is not a solution to all of the world's ills in that regard. But it is certainly emotional. And it also brings to bear, and as we learned about the passing of Professor Joseph Nye last week, the relevance of discussing soft power and the possibility of soft power networks of sport diplomacy. These are particularly relevant because they bring people together who otherwise wouldn't be speaking to each other. And so sport provides that means of a conversation. And I defer to someone who was at one time during my time at, in London 2012, my boss, Lord Coe. Fundamentally, I believe sport is the best diplomat we have. Sport does things that other things can't in our world. And I think that is where I would like to pause my remarks. Hopefully, I've set up my colleagues for some further contributions. But I thank you very much for my time. Thank you, Fahmida, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to Faiza for allowing me to speak. Been a pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Simon. That was indeed insightful to start the base note as we move on to our case studies and the wonderful panel where all the experts would be adding to further insights to what you have already shared. We have right now around 200 participants joining us live from all around the world, across Asia, Africa, Europe, Caribbean. And don't forget to introduce yourself and ask questions in the Q&A and in the chat section of Zoom. Now, to bring the practical insights and present case study, let's welcome Ms. Silvija Mitevska. Silvija is the co-founder and managing director of Sports Social Solutions, an NGO based in North Macedonia. She has previously served as an advisor to the Prime Minister of North Macedonia on sports and held leadership roles as president of the Commission on Gender Equality at the National Olympic Committee and the Sustainability Commission at the International Techball Federation. She is also an alumna of the Global Sports Mentoring Program of the US Department of State and a proactive leader in the space of sport diplomacy. Currently, she serves as a program director of the first international education program dedicated on sport diplomacy. Welcome, Silvija. The floor is all yours. We are excited to hear the case study that you present to us.
Thank you so much, Fahmida. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to this great webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you're joining us from around the world. I'm currently speaking from the beautiful city of Paris, so it's a good day indeed for me. And thank you to Faiza for the kind invitation to speak, to have the opportunity to speak on the topic of sport diplomacy, and for organizing such a productive and well-attended webinar as well. So today I will be sharing my hands-on or practical experience in applying and I would say even experimenting with sports diplomacy within my own country, North Macedonia, but also in the wider region in the Western Balkans as well. So as someone who has pioneered sports diplomacy in this region, I have encountered challenges, but also opportunities. And I would like to start my presentation exactly with that slide. Just give me a second because I'm going to share the presentation now. Okay, so, oops, sorry. Okay, can you see my presentation, Fahmida? If you can just, I can't see anyone. If you can just.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
Yes.
Okay. So the challenges, being a pioneer. So if you want to launch or to be more proactive in exercising and applying sports diplomacy within your own community, with your own context, of course that you're going to encounter challenges. So the initial challenges that I have encountered when I started pushing very hard on sports diplomacy agenda. The first one was the fear of the unknown. So they've never heard about sports diplomacy before. The resistance to new concepts. People sometimes can be quite resistant to something that they're not familiar with. Lack of trust as well, because sport can be misunderstood and can be misused for certain political reasons as well. So there was a big lack of trust. And something that came really very strong was also the skepticism from athletes, because sometimes they have been misled and they have been misused in different political settings. So these were the initial challenges that I have encountered when I started applying sport diplomacy within my region. But whenever there are challenges, there are also opportunities, especially if you're pioneering something new. So being the first to introduce the concept of sport diplomacy in your country will really give you a significant advantage. And that is because you can shape the narrative. You are the first one to help define the priorities, to help set the agenda, and very importantly, to really position yourself as a key figure in drafting and implementing sports diplomacy initiatives at any level, community, national, or even regional level. In North Macedonia, what we have basically done in the past few years is that we have created a three-pillar circle or the framework. The first main step was to recognize the grassroots initiatives and all the community efforts that are happening all the time, but they are not on the radar of the governments and they are not recognized by the government. But there are so many beautiful initiatives that help advance social change through sport diplomacy. So the first one was to include grassroots initiatives in the field of sport diplomacy. The second one was to formulate sport diplomacy policies. And the third one was also to focus on education and awareness for athletes. We have done this because we understood, just as Professor Simon Rofe mentioned before, sport diplomacy, the traditional sport diplomacy, we have a new one, the modern, the well-networked sport diplomacy. So diplomacy is not seen anymore only through the embassy window, but we would really like to have the horizontal and the vertical aspects and involving as many state and non-state actors within this emerging field. The main national priorities that we have identified that were important for my countries were the nation branding and promoting trade and investment as well. So once we have formulated this, once everyone was on board with what we want to achieve through sport as a soft power, we have done a series of events, and in the interest of the limited time that we have through this webinar, I will only share the key event and initiative that we have organized, and that is we have basically leveraged the mega sport event, the Euro 2020, when our Macedonian male football team has for the first time ever qualified to play. We have coupled that mega event with a side event happening in Bucharest in Romania, where our team was playing. And we organized a very successful trade event with the objectives to establish trade agreements between the Macedonian and Romanian Chamber of Commerce. We wanted to promote Macedonian food of excellence, so we brought many investors, many producers of Macedonian food and wines as well. So there was a big exhibition at the same place, at the venue of the Chamber of Commerce in Romania, and of course to enhance the export of Macedonian products. And here, basically what we have done, and we saw that it works perfectly and very successfully, is when you combine those mega events and you don't only cheer only for your team, but you can leverage that great platform to achieve something more for your country. And in this case was to produce and to introduce more partnerships between Romania and North Macedonia as well. So this was one of the highlights that we have had. And from this one, we have produced many other local initiatives that were following up after this great event we had in Bucharest. What I want to highlight also this webinar, because it is organized by Tafisa, is that sport for all diplomacy, and just like Professor Simon Rofe already mentioned, is that everyone can play a very proactive role in using and experimenting and applying diplomacy or sport as a tool for soft power. But very importantly, one of the most crucial figure in all of this are the athletes. I think that, and we all know that they can be very passionate advocates, they are influential public figures, they have such a powerful voice that they can lend. And perhaps with the right support, with the framework that we can provide for them, their impact that they're already having can be significantly applied. And therefore, one of the next initiatives that we are working on in North Macedonia is the new initiative. It is about how to advance sport diplomacy in Western Balkans through mega events with 4 main objectives. The first one is how to leverage sport mega events as soft power projections. The second objective is to build capacity and to raise and to enhance the capacities of the regional national Olympic committees on sport diplomacy, to establish the working group or a sport diplomacy hub in Western Balkans, and also to host a regional sport diplomacy summit. And for the first time in our country or in our region, this initiative will be supported by the International Olympic Committee, and it will be implemented by the National Olympic Committee of North Macedonia. So it's something that it's about to start. And if someone from the participants, online participants at these webinars come from this region, you can reach out to us, because we would love to have as many partnerships as possible in the coming year when this project and this initiative will be implemented. What are the lessons learned that I can share with you, and maybe they can serve as practical tools of someone that wants to be more proactive in the field of sport diplomacy? The first one is that we all need to map the assets of our communities or our country. What could be attractive, both at community, national, or international level? In which way you can engage national or international audiences? The second one is that nothing happens by accident. So we really need to put effort to create appropriate environment and to nurture that environment. The third one is that I strongly recommend that we need to intentionally strategize our actions. We need to formulate sport diplomacy policies that need to come with great effort. So it shouldn't be something that is done ad hoc, but it's something that you do it with intention, with time and effort spent in it. At the same time, we need to be very clear on what we are communicating, because sometimes we believe that sport can solve all the problems of the world, and it cannot. So what I have learned is that we need to manage the expectations about what sport can, and also importantly, what cannot achieve. Then I will strongly encourage also to have as much as possible inclusive partnership. So the more diverse our network becomes, the greater the impact is. We need to invite so-called new diplomatic actors from the grassroots movement, even private sector, influential sport figures, but also community sport leaders as well. I think that this will really enhance the impact that we will try to achieve. And if your country is pouring money in the sports diplomacy initiative, we need to find a way how to measure the success. This is not always easy because soft power priorities or objectives achieved are not easy to measure, but there's always a way to find how, in which way we can evaluate whether your actions are really helping define and achieve the national priorities. And the last one will be consistent. You really need to have consistent messaging on what you want to achieve. So I would echo many scholars around the world that have been talking about this topic, is that we need networked people-to-people sport diplomacy happening in the world, and we need to empower athletes and non-state actors. And by non-state actors, I mean all the grassroots sports clubs, sports movements, sport governing bodies, athletes themselves, everyone that wants to play a role in the sport diplomacy, to create an environment where we can really encourage them to think beyond the traditional roles in sport and how they can use what they already have built. And sometimes it takes years and years to build experience and success in sport, and how we can use that beyond the sports results on something that we can achieve for our community or for our people, for our countries. I believe that we need to find a way how to support transition, especially to athletes and sports professionals, of not being only passive participants in the sport diplomacy programs, but also how they can become an active co-creators. And of course, involve them meaningfully in the program design and in the strategic dialogue. And one of the ways how we can do that, and I'm very happy to share this particular program that we have created, is the master program, international master program on sport diplomacy that we are running together with the Hungarian University of Sports Science. This is the second year, and we have managed from postgraduate to advance the program to a master level. It runs for 1 year. It can be full-time or hybrid. Here you have the QR code that you can scan, and you can go to the website where you can find more information about that, or you can also have the contact and you can raise all the questions to the people behind the program. I can only say that I'm very happy to see Fahmida as a participant of one of our first cohorts, and I do hope that I will see as many other sport professionals, sport athletes, or anyone coming from the sports ecosystem that would like to explore and to invest in the education of sport diplomacy and what sport can do more for their own countries and for their own professional development as well. And I will stop here. I want to thank you all for their attention. And once again, congratulations to Faiza for organizing such a powerful webinar on such a relevant and emerging topic as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvija. That was interesting and insightful for all of us to share, to see your level of engagement and the case studies that you are implementing on ground. And I'm pretty sure that's inspiring for all of our participants who have joined today. And at this point, we have around 200 participants joining us live, and we would like to take your insights as we move on for our panel. So we would have a little bit of interaction with all of you who has joined us right now. I request you to join through the Mentimeter link that has been shared in the Zoom chat box to share your insights on the two questions. If I could request the Faiza team to show it in the screen, please, the questions, Mentimeter questions, so that we can see your inputs in real time. But I think after the wonderful insights that has been shared by Professor Rofe and the case studies that actually elaborated how in real life, at a governmental level, at a people-to-people level, sport diplomacy, sport for all diplomacy is being practiced, I think that leads us to a wonderful starting of our panel session that is upcoming. And we have an excellent range of experts who are joining with us. But as we are moving for our panel, I think to make it more meaningful, all of your participation is highly important in this engagement. For our first question, we have, do you believe sport for all can play a meaningful role in addressing global issues? I think if you have joined through the link, we are already starting to get the answers, and we can see a mix of responses. Yes, no, not very sure, and that lays a good foundation for us to explore that further. Is sport for all meaningful when it comes to addressing global issue in a diplomatic way, in seeing through the role of sport diplomacy? Okay, we have quite a lot of participants sharing us different insights. That takes us to our second question. While you can keep answering through the same link, which of these barriers do you think most limits the potential of sport for all diplomacy in your region and context? And that actually helps us to understand from all of your diverse perspective, from the realities in Caribbean is definitely not the realities what we see in Europe. So please let us know, what are these barriers that you think that are most crucial in terms of limiting the potential of sport for all diplomacy? Is it the lack of understanding? Is it the lack of funding? Is it the lack of awareness, political or cultural resistance, limited access to sport infrastructure, or unclear policy frameworks? We are seeing the responses going quite heavy on the first three. That's interesting, lack of understanding. I think that's where the next panel is going to be insightful for all of us to develop further understanding and awareness. So thank you for everyone who are giving your input. We would have a second round of the questions, but we loved hearing from you. And now I think as we move for our panel session, I would like to ask all of you that if sport for all were a country, what would its motto be? So keep answering that in the chat box while we move on with the first panelist in our panel. And I would like to invite our first speaker, Mr. Nasser Khori, but let me introduce him because he has done extensive amount of work through his role as the Executive Director of Generation Amazing Foundation, the flagship human and social legacy foundation stemming from the FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022. With a rich background in the nonprofit sector, Nasser has played a pivotal role in launching Doha debates and other initiatives under the Qatar Foundation. His expertise in sports governance and social responsibility is further recognized through his extensive engagement with the United Nations and different agencies such as UNESCO, UNOCT, and Football for the Goals Advisory Foundation. I could keep going, but I would leave the floor to Nasser. Why don't you just share a little bit about your work? And as we move to our question, I would also ask the question right away for the sake of time, that from a practical perspective, Generation Amazing has worked in communities affected by conflict and inequalities. What are some of the key lessons that you have learned in using sport as a tool for diplomacy and dialogue in these settings and regions? Over to you, Nasser.
Thank you so much, Fahmida. And I just want to say again, thank you for Tafisa for inviting me to speak on this very important webinar today. And it's a pleasure to be, amongst all the other panelists and everyone that's joined us today as well. As you've mentioned, Generation Amazing Foundation is the Human and Social Legacy Foundation from the FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022. The idea is that we were established at the very early stages of the bid when Qatar wanted to host the World Cup in 2010. Obviously, there's a CSR component as part of FIFA's bid, but the idea was that we wanted to create a foundation that was sort of looking at the role of sports in communities, mainly looking at kind of providing opportunities for marginalized and impoverished communities around the world, but also how there could be a legacy that starts from the early stages of the World Cup and extends beyond the World Cup and not just ends with the 30-day tournament. So the idea is that we were announced as a foundation right a couple of days before the World Cup in December of 2022 at a youth festival. And the idea is that, you know, we're still around today. We're looking at sports generally. Initially, it was football because of the FIFA World Cup. Now we're looking at all sports. We're also looking at, you know, legacy initiatives around mega sporting events, whether it's Olympics, whether it's FIBA World Cup, which is coming here again to Qatar in 2027. So that's kind of, you know, Generation Amazing in a nutshell. I think going back to your question in terms of, you know, what the lessons learned and kind of, you know, around, you know, sports as a tool for diplomacy and dialogue, I think, you know, I think one of the most important things is partnerships. And I think, you know, partnerships generally is foundational to the work that we do at Generation Amazing. We work with over 60 international partners, you know, aligned with the community needs, obviously, but, you know, looking at global goals as well. And then, you know, localizing sports for development is very important to us and everything we do. You know, we always listen first the community needs and kind of we adapt programming based on that. And, you know, this also creates a meaningful and sustainable impact in the long run. And then that's how we also build trust with the community and the community members. And so it also creates consistency and it's not just one-off interventions or activations. And the other thing also is, you know, for us, youth is there, you know, although that's kind of our target beneficiary, they're not just participants in our programs. We see them as, you know, leaders, peace builders within their communities. If you take our Generation Amazing community clubs, these are safe spaces that we built in various communities that don't have access to, you know, simple football pitches, for example, or basketball courts. You know, it's usually youth-led, and we focus on empowering the youth through sports. And we believe in promoting youth, you know, within the safe spaces, and we build capacity building programs that encourage their growth, encourages their creativity, and, you know, for them to be able to positively contribute to their own communities. And, you know, again, I have a lot of examples. I'm going to share one example of our youth advocate in India. Her name is Madiha Jankaro, and she is from Pakistan. Sorry, not India. And she, you know, again, she came to us with an idea of turning our community club into a community center or a safe space for women to be able to play football and create the, you know, a women's football club. And, you know, through her leadership and through the skills that she learned through the Generation Amazing Foundation and our community, our curriculum around football for development, it is now a hub that is, you know, looking at, you know, providing a safe space for the women to be able to play football, but also looking at, you know, gender equality workshops, educating women, empowering women through sports. And again, this goes back to our, you know, again, our hashtag is pass it on. And I, you know, the idea is that everything we do is, you know, the idea is that, you know, it's based on capacity building, that we promote the values of sports. And that gets passed on from our beneficiaries, from our coaches to other community members. And that's why it's a cycle and it doesn't sort of end with one person. And I have a quote as well from Madiha that I'd like to share. My purpose is not only success for me, but whatever I have success, I pass it on to different girls in my community. I make a route for them and open the door for them to be able to walk through and go on to make their own dreams come true. So that's just, again, one example of one community, you know, space that, you know, we've kind of provided in a very underprivileged, marginalized community in Pakistan. The other thing also, as I mentioned, you know, capacity building is very important. You know, we have a train-the-trainer model, and this is essential to scale and impact, you know, within communities, especially affected by conflict and inequality. And we, again, operate in person and also online. We have a sports for an e-learning platform that hosts a series of modules around the sports for development curriculum, and that we've developed across, you know, and rolled out across, you know, several countries around the world. And this is done in partnership with a lot of other organizations. And, you know, one example is, you know, here in Qatar, we've trained coaches within the Gaza residential compound. We've evacuated a number of Gazans since the genocide and to Qatar for medical treatment. And basically, we've trained local members of the community of Gaza. They're all youth. And so right now, they're basically coaches that have been empowered, and they're leading their own sports for development sessions for the younger kids, especially supporting them with psychosocial recovery and promoting inclusive community development using sports as well. Again, the psychosocial healing and trauma affected kind of populations, there is a role, a very important role for sports to play there. We've seen it firsthand in our programs, whether it's with the Afghan evacuees that came through Qatar, the Gazans also that are residing currently here in Jordan and Lebanon and other places as well. Sport promotes social cohesion and breaks down barriers through play. And again, I'm gonna kind of go through a few examples. Going back to the Gaza community here, we've delivered a combination of sports for development interventions, structured football sessions, and community development programs, as well as a train-the-trainer model, as I mentioned. And we're looking at kind of facilitating rehabilitation through sports and sports programming, which serve as a tool to build a routine supporting psychosocial healing and offering participants a sense of normalcy amid the crisis that's ongoing, but also to create that cohesion and kind of sense of belonging within their community. Obviously, post disruption, they've left their community. They're residing here. They have family members back home that are still going through conflict, and then also promoting core values. I think through sports, children and youth learn vital life skills. That goes across from like teamwork, respect, tolerance, leadership skills, communication skills. And I think this is what, and especially in conflict zones and marginalized communities, when there's no access, for example, to school or a classroom, the football pitch can act as a replacement to kind of providing some of these life skills and kind of embedding these life skills in the youth. And then also strengthening community cohesion. The program helps build stronger community bonds between the coaches, between the kids, between the families as well. We've seen on a number of bases parents coming together, supporting the kids on the pitch. And that also extends, not just for the kids on the pitch, but everyone around the community. And then also the community and leadership development, I think, is another big emphasis, kind of focus of Generation Amazing. So, we empower residents by training them to kind of provide these sport coaching opportunities, equipping them with to take on these leadership skills and roles, and kind of that is how we create sustainability, because they're the ones that are leading. We support them from the back end. So I think that's sort of in a nutshell how we kind of look at addressing kind of the role of sports in specific communities that are affected by conflict. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nasser. I think that beautifully complemented to our case study that was presented. In fact, this was another set of case studies on resilience, and passing it on is such a beautiful message. You have shared beautifully the meaningful work of Generation Amazing. And we can also see in the chat box, the e-learning platform link has been shared. I highly encourage all of our participants to ask questions in the chat box. Being very mindful of the time, I would like to move to our next panelist, Po Shun Liu. Ms. Po Shun Liu is the founder and CEO of the Taiwan Sport Forward Association of Chinese Taipei. Ms. Liu is one of the most powerful women in international sports, as featured in Forbes 2018 list. She is the first woman international baseball umpire from Taiwan, making her World Cup debut as an umpire in the WBSC Women's Baseball World Cup in 2010 in Venezuela. In 2019, Ms. Liu has been awarded the World's Trophy from the International Olympic Committee and delivered an award speech at the UN Women for her advocacy work on gender equality. In collaboration with the American in Taiwan and the Taiwan government agencies, she advocated Taiwan Congress to establish the Taiwan Parliamentary Women's Sport Diplomacy Committee. With the incredible amount of work that you have done, Ms. Liu, we are hugely inspired, and we ask you the question, how can we measure the impact of sport for all diplomacy? You are a living example and your work has so much meaning. Please share with us.
Thank you, Fahmida. Thank you so much. And it's my privilege to here to share my experience. And Assalamualaikum. And here, thanks for Dr. Simon with a great introduction and definition of sport diplomacy. I learned a lot as well. I will find a book. And thank you, my sister Silvija and Nasser. Your case study also very inspired me. And for me, allow me to introduce myself, although Fahmida already have the great introduction. Because my plan in Taiwan, basically I start up with my own experience. So I would like to make this impact to other youth and girls. So basically I'm a baseball umpire, and as you know, the baseball is very single gender sports in global sports, because seldom do you see women play sports. And I choose to be an umpire, and because I was a big fan of baseball, I always yelling at the umpire. So I would like change the game. So I decided to be an umpire. And then I realized that is how it's difficult to have a girl as a woman to stay in the stadium. So, but basically I'm very enjoy my practice in karate. And also I'm a Muslim. That is very minority population in Taiwan. So that is the background why it's make me have interesting to do this my work. So at the beginning, I promoted the women baseball in Asia, and then I really have become a more comfortable, healthy, and really can feel the girls change around me. So I want to make girls believe they have the potential to take charge in their life despite the traditional stereotypes. Because since I want to play baseball, people always tell me that it's impossible. You cannot make it. No one make it before, so you will fail as well. So baseball make me to become who I am now. I want the girls feel they can do anything, just like me on the baseball diamond. And now it's not only on baseball diamond, but also in other sports. So I founded a NGO to promote the value of to empower and inspire youth ethics. And also we focus on to advocate gender equality in sports. And Taiwan can help. We are willing to promote the sport diplomacy to work with other countries. Yeah. So for the athlete, the first thing that we really concerned is very significant is that about to keep healthy and prevent the injury. So we have the clinic to teach and help the young athlete how to protect themselves. And it's not only for injury from the sport, but also protect themselves from the bullying and sexual harassment. So we have the clinic, we call it Strike It Out clinic to use my karate technique. And we have the therapist, doctors to instruct our girls how to prevent injury and sexual harassment. And we work with Malaysia Baseball and Softball Association. And we also have the event. We provide the baseball gear and uniform to Gaza because actually at the beginning, just because they give me a message that the girls they want to play baseball, so there's no way I turn it down. So we provide the events, the equipment to make them can have fun. So basically, I just want the girls they have fun and they deserve it. And also I have a sister also from GSMP group program, and she is a very outstanding basketball player. And when we have the chat, she told me that in Bangladesh, she can play basketball. However, she is not allowed to be a coach or to be an referee. So that's really unfair, especially it's recall me like my career in baseball. So I say, let's see what we can do. So we help out the Bangladesh with 4 girls and 1 male coach to get a license, basketball coach license. And also we bring a team there to provide our best coach course, and also the umpire course, and also some body boundary, self-protect, and injury course to Bangladesh. And also we have, since the soccer is football is the most popular sport, and we believe that the youth is our future. So we have the youth development program. We selected 5 female outstanding football players. They have exchange in USA and make friends with 9 other countries. Now they come back last year, and we have the 4 clinic workshop for them. And they are not player anymore. They are not student anymore. Now they are lecturer. So with this workshop, and they share how to develop the women leadership. They share how they use football to make them more confidence and development their entrepreneurial spirit. And also we bring the same football sport technique and science training and medical care as well during the workshops and work with a hospital in Taiwan. So we also participate in some our NOC gender equality conference. So we are also calling for further opportunity. If your country would like to have an event, our football girls are very willing to participate and bring our clinic and workshop to your country and play with girls. And also the Sport for War, and we work with Saudi Arabia Embassy in Taiwan. We provided the disabled kids baseball event, fun events, 1 or twice a year. We believe that every kids, not only use women's, but also the disabled kids, they are worthy to encourage them to play sports. So we redesign the sports and make the kids, they are able to reach their body condition. So everyone is fun, and everyone to promote the inclusive. And also we have the sport broad program, because we, according to a statistic, 70% of girls who stop playing sports because of the broad. So we provide the broad and work with about 10 NGOs and to help girls to continue to doing sports and participate in school. And also we believe that the policy of the vocation can make an even greater policy influence. So we have the parliament committee, and so we advocate our government to put more resources or make the law to protect our youth and the women's rights in sports. And also we have some teaching materials as well. Yeah. And so for the local sports, because at the beginning I always value the methods very much, but now I realize that the sports is not only about method. Sports is about how to make we people and the young youth more healthy and find their own potential. So we have some local events, because I'm a social worker as well. So we have the program to help the youth to discover their potential career and tutors and the financial aid scholarship to encourage them to apply the university scholarship. So this is our main program in Taiwan locally. And at the beginning, people were wondering like, why don't we provide more training, because they're going to occupy the time to training on the field. But I tell the coach and our society that if you give the kids more space and resource, and their potential is beyond your imagination. I mean, before the athlete, they are youth, they are students. So if you perform, if you are very confident off the field, you're going to play well on the field as well. So guess what? Our girls won the U15 Asia Championship as well. So it's a proof that our kids, they can do the studying well and they can play well as well. Yeah. So for me, I think just believe in kids, believe in youth, and believing in the potential. Yeah. So in Taiwan, we also have the Sport Diplomacy Summit in 2023, and we discussed about sports education and sports media, and also the gender equality. And the most important, I hope Chinese Taipei, I mean Taiwan, can be the platform as in Asia Pacific or maybe the world, that we can be a platform and we can work together to discuss, just like tonight, we can discuss how to share the case and how to apply that in our daily life, or we are looking for a further collaboration potential. So this is what we believe. We believe that our goal is to empower youth through sports, and we also believe strong women, better world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leo. I cannot say enough how inspired I am, and I'm pretty sure we have been flooded with comments among the participants. The power of youth that both you and Nasser have shared during your session, it's incredible, and that takes us to the next panelist. I'm being very mindful of the time because I know we have an amazing set of experts, but we would address all of your questions at the end of the session, so please keep asking the questions. Now, for our next speaker, we have Mr. Gavin Price. Mr. Price brings over 20 years of leadership experience in international trade, intercultural relations, and diplomacy from across Australian, UK, and international public sectors. A recognized expert in sport diplomacy, particularly in small nations and football diplomacy, he is the European Director of the Global Consulting Agency, Sport Diplomacy Alliance, and the founder and the author of Sport Diplomacy Unwrapped, a leading insights and news platform in the field. Mr. Price, the floor is all yours. We are excited to hear from you. Our question to you would be, sport is often referred to as an imaginary community that mirrors the real world, but has a sense of isolation from it. Stakeholders might be more willing to ensure diplomacy in the sports field and not in the societal areas. Is this a challenge to actual relevance of sport diplomacy or a distinctive feature of the strength that sport holds? Can you give your insight on this, Mr. Price?
Thanks, Fahmida. Fantastic to see you again. And good day from Australia. I'm in Canberra, so it's the evening here. So good evening wherever you are in the world. Wonderful to see my friends and colleagues and experts from around the sports diplomacy community. And wow, 200 people online. That's fantastic. So thanks for having me, and thanks for the opportunity, Tavisa. So as Fahmida mentioned, I work for Sports Diplomacy Alliance. Just very briefly, we're an international consulting agency working on sports diplomacy solutions with a variety of stakeholders, so governments, business, civil society actors, and the many stakeholders across the international sports landscape. We deliver policy, representation, research, training, and strategy. But let's fast forward to the question, because that's why we're here. And I will try to keep my answer short, because I want to hear from all of our guests online today, because I'm sure that some of the sort of narrative that I wanted to cover has already been covered. So I'll try and keep it short for you. So To begin, I'd like to respectfully, I guess, challenge the premise of the question, and also my, with respect to Benedict Anderson, who came up with the research and theory around imagined communities. But for me, in my experience, sports isn't isolated from the rest of the world. In fact, instead, it opens the door to it. I've worked on many projects around the world where sport has been a catalyst for broader international engagement, diplomatic engagement, enabling many countries and non-state actors to deploy their full soft power toolkit. So things like language, arts, culture, history, and many other things, alongside harder power variables like trade and international security, or more progressive policy like future generations or sustainability or social inclusion. So if I take my home nation of Wales, which is a small country, a constituent nation of the United Kingdom, as an example, for Wales, sport has been a Trojan horse for international engagement. And I'll give you one sort of concrete example of that. And Wales has done many things in the sports diplomacy space. But during the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, the Men's World Cup, Wales used its historic qualification to project its identity and values globally on the world stage. And it's very significant for a small country, the first time Wales had qualified for 58 years. It was in a group with powerhouses in world football like England and the United States. So it was really an opportunity to put its best foot forward on the world stage. But Wales was quite clever. What it did was it took a Team Cymru, Cymru being the Welsh name for Wales, a one-nation approach to sports diplomacy. So what it did was it pulled together its full arsenal of civil society and government actors. So that would be everyone from people like Museums Wales through to the Welsh Government, through to the Football Association of Wales or the Welsh Rugby Union. And it pulled together their assets to have a one-nation approach to sports diplomacy. So there was a lot of messaging that was bilingual in English and Welsh. A lot of people would know that Wales is a bilingual country. So it enabled us to have a bit of a niche differentiation point. Also, we came up with what was known as the Gwyl Cymru Festival of Football. So basically, that was a campaign that reached many cities and countries worldwide. So everywhere from Dubai to Brussels to Washington to Toronto to Dusseldorf in Germany. And what we did was we combined softer power events and engagements with harder power events. So, for example, in Washington, D.C., you saw watch parties where the Wales versus US group game was on a big screen in front of thousands of people from the public who were allowed to come along. And then in the evening, there were things like nightclub takeovers where Welsh and US DJs would take over nightclubs and there would be a party around the football. We would bring in bands and music acts from Wales and also local acts, and they would play together. So creating a kind of cultural fusion around football, sports, and the World Cup. But also around that, we did a lot of formal stuff. So there are things like trade roundtables or roundtables on things like social inclusion. Wales is very big on future generations. It was one of the first countries in the world to integrate a legal act into everything it does. So if you want to pass any policy in Wales, it needs to legally think about future generations. And that's been taken up in the UN, which is a big deal for a small country like Wales. And there are various other countries looking at it, like the Netherlands, New Zealand, Jamaica, and many others. So I guess the point I wanted to make is sport isn't just symbolic, it's actually strategic. And for small nations in particular like Wales, but obviously big nations also, and we've heard from Simon, who's done a lot of work at the UK level. We heard from Silvia's experiences in North Macedonia and our other guests. But look, it's often central to cultural identity and nation branding, particularly for small nations. It's not separate from diplomacy. In fact, it enables it. So I guess to simply answer your question, I don't see sport as an island. Instead, it's an icebreaker. It's an enabler. In fact, it's the glue that connects the full spectrum of soft power and diplomatic activities. In terms of major nations, you're seeing France and Australia starting to mirror some of these things. Obviously, they are bigger nations with bigger budgets and bigger influence in the world, and they have many other hard power variables connected to their sports diplomacy. But they're increasingly using their soft power assets connected with sport. So I think a good example would be the Cultural Olympiad around the Paris Olympics. I think, the French really lifted their game there with art installations, light installations, and many things that showcase the beautiful city of Paris and the wonderful culture of France. So I think, what I will say to you is, if you really want to see some cooler examples of sports diplomacy, and I am talking my own book here, I am from Wales, from a small country, I'd say at the moment, just look towards the smaller nations. Silvija outlined some of the cool stuff happening in North Macedonia, but there are countries like Fiji or the Basque Country or Catalonia, which are nations within Spain. They're doing some really, really cool things in sports diplomacy. I think keep an eye out on the sporting agenda. So if we look forward to the summer, we've got the Women's Euros, Euro 2025. Women's sport has exploded. Again, it's the first time the Welsh national team was qualified at the women's level for a major tournament. You will see an integrated programme of sports diplomacy events run by Wales. They will use that sort of one nation, Team Wales approach to sports diplomacy. Again, you'll see things like music and arts installations, but you'll also see hard pair variables around international trade and so on. On that note, I might hand the floor back to you, Fahmida, and invite some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Price. I think that's actually beautifully rounded up from a very different, diversified perspective, from not only from a regional context, but also on ground, that how sport for all diplomacy is bridging the gap and bringing everyone together. And the world does not define a smaller economy or a smaller country anymore, or a bigger country. I think sport for all diplomacy is giving everyone that equal chance to dream, to collaborate, and to work together, and to empower the next generation. That actually takes us to our next speaker, but please feel free to ask your questions during the Q&A. I can already see a lot of questions also in the chat box. Feel free to redirect in the Q&A part, because our next segment would be the Q&A. As we move to our next speaker, I think we have heard quite a good dimension from the civil society actors, from the sport for good organizations, from the legacy perspectives. But what we would like to hear from a government perspective right now, and I would like to invite our next panelist. He's the Counselor of Health, Welfare and Sport of the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in India, Mr. Nico Schietekatte. And in my understanding that his work has interesting perspective to add to us right now, because Mr. Nico has been a counselor at the embassy in New Delhi since September 1st, 2024, liaising with Indian authorities and various other stakeholders, both in private and public sector, in the field of health, welfare and sport. But prior to his assignment in India, he has served in Brazil and France. So I believe you have a unique perspective across South America, Europe, and Asia to bring forward us together in terms of a government perspective and the narrative, because throughout his diplomatic career, he has been involved and served during various sports events, such as the Olympic and Paralympic Games in various countries covering the period of 2020 to 2024. Mr. Nico, without further ado, I would straight go to the question, being very mindful of the time. Would you like to share with us what role should government and international organizations, international institutions play in scaling up grassroots sport for all initiatives with diplomatic potential? Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me on this wonderful panel, on this amazing event. I also spent 4 years in China, where I was involved also in the Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games in Beijing. So quite some experience in different countries, indeed, in Brazil, France, China, and now in India on sports diplomacy. Very happy to share my perspective, and it is very clear. First of all, congratulations to the organization. For us in the Netherlands, sport unites, and I think that your event is an excellent illustration of this very much unifying power, strong unifying power of sports and sport diplomacy. So from the Netherlands, the term inclusive sports is a major topic in which we engage at 3 different levels. First of all, at the multilateral level, think, for instance, on the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which has a very clear sports component as well. Secondly, as obviously we are a European country, member of the European Union, we operate also at the European level. Think, for instance, of the European sports model, Just two distinguishing elements. So for the sake of time, indeed, I will make it very short. Two distinguishing elements. The first being that there's a clear call within the European Union with the European sport model for the sports movement and public authorities to join forces, including stimulating voluntary activity and the social educational function of sport. Second distinguishing feature that I would like to highlight is a comprehensive solidarity model with grassroots sports at the basis. And the third level will not surprise you is obviously the national level in the Netherlands, where we focus very clearly within our policy on inclusive sports on three specific target groups. First of all, as already mentioned by previous speakers, youth. Secondly, people with disabilities. And thirdly, people living in relative poverty. And for these three groups, we have set clear targets where we want to be in 2028. And why 2028? Because in 2028, it would have been 100 years ago that we had organized the Games in Amsterdam. So it's important to set targets and to also have some symbolism in your targets, of course. So for these specific targets, what do you need? A very strong basis with three elements for scaling up grassroots initiatives. First of all, infrastructure, which meets the needs of these target groups that I just mentioned. Secondly, further strengthening associations. In the Netherlands, which is a small country in size, but maybe a bigger country in terms of sports, we have 23,000 grassroots sports associations. And thirdly, volunteers. It is very important to stimulate, also from a governmental perspective, volunteers to do their volunteering work. Now for us, and especially in this context of this event you have wonderfully organized, international cooperation strengthens our national goals. And this is where obviously sports diplomacy comes into the picture by three elements. First of all, sharing knowledge, including on socially safe and fair sports, as one of the previous speakers highlighted rightfully as well. Secondly, sharing innovation, for instance, on devices, on sustainability as well. We have sports parks that supply energy to their neighborhoods. Thirdly, enhancing equity through sports. And of course, you have to walk the talk as well. Just an illustration, in the summer of 2023, the Netherlands hosted the European Para Championships. It was the first time this happened in Europe, with 45 countries and 10 sports in Rotterdam. And earlier, for instance, we had organized the Invictus Games in The Hague, which is also very important on engaging in sports. For the sake of time, I will stick to this, but I'd be happy to take any question that there might be from the audience.
Wow, thank you, Ambassador. I think that was wonderful for us to know that how much a government interest can give a well-rounded shape to the sport for all diplomacy, and we all have our parts to play, and how the important work of the Netherlands, the sport for diplomacy, sport for all diplomacy is extending further beyond borders, beyond regions, and bringing everyone together. Thank you so much for sharing the key points, and I believe that what you stressed on, and all of the speakers had one thing in common, stressing on the power of youth. That takes us to the next speaker, who is a young researcher and in the field of academia. And I think that will very well round our panel. And as she is our last speaker, Carole Gomez, a PhD candidate from University of Lausanne, Switzerland. She is currently studying and doing her research in the Institute of Sports Science in the University of Lausanne. And her research focuses on safeguarding in sports and how international sport federations address this issue within their respective disciplines. She's also collaborating with the Global Observatory on the gender equality in sports. And previously she worked as a researcher and later as a director of research for 10 years at IRIS, which is the French Institute of International and Strategic Affairs, a French think tank. She worked on sports and geopolitics, sport diplomacy, and sport governance. I think coming with the whole round of emphasis on the power of youth. The floor is on you, Carole, as we ask you the question that based on your experience, how has sport diplomacy contributed to addressing or easing global conflicts in the past? Would you like to share with us, Carole?
Thank you so much for this invitation, and thank you so much for this event. Thank you, Tafisa. It's a great honor and a great pleasure to be here. So as the time is running out, so I will try to stick to the point. But I would like to maybe organize my thought in 3 points. The first one, and I will exactly quote Silvija, but also Simon, who said that actually we have to be very cautious about sports diplomacy. Obviously, sport can do a lot, but it not can do everything and anything. So we have to be very precise when we have to address sports diplomacy. It's not a magic stick. It's not a magic tool. It could help to address some political issues. It will definitely easier the way, but it will not solve at all. So it's really important to have this in mind to better understand how sports diplomacy works. And also, I will jump on what Gavin said about the sports diplomacy. In my opinion, it's important to have in mind that sports diplomacy is not unique at all. Every single stakeholder, every single actors will be able to use sport as a way of diplomacy, by using its own assets, its own characteristic and specific characteristics. So it's also really important to have this in mind. In order to answer to your question, actually we have a very multiple example of how sport diplomacy could help diplomacy and geopolitics. Obviously, we didn't mention at all this example, but the very first big example that we have developed regarding sports diplomacy was ping pong diplomacy, used in 1971 between the United States of America and the Democratic Republic of China, and it really paved the way from an official visit of Nixon in Beijing in '72. So it was really important to have this in mind. But in order to answer to your question, we can see sports diplomacy as a glue for people between communities at local, national, regional, or globally level. Let me. Silvija gave a great example about how sport diplomacy could help at local, but also at national level, even at regional. It could also be, we can also give some concrete example at national level, obviously with a South African example, with Nelson Mandela. It was quoted by Simon Rofe, but it's super important to have this in mind. It could be, we can also give the example of Ivory Coast with Didier Drogba, who used sport in order to help the dialogue between communities. At regional level, it could be interesting to have several examples in mind. For example, Turkey and Cyprus, who use sport as a tool in order to rebuild or to build diplomacy. We can also have in mind the football diplomacy between Turkey and Armenia. In 2009, when you organize a game in order to connect together, and there is very important example that we have on the top level on the mega sport event during the Olympics and Paralympics in South Korea, when South Korea and North Korea decided to work together at the end of 2017, just before the Olympics and Paralympics in South Korea. And it was, in my opinion, quite an interesting example, because they were, at the time, the relationship between the two countries was extremely complicated, especially after the few years with a very high tension. And then for this event, they decided to go together, to discuss together, and to have a concrete discussion, to come to very practically organize the the visit of the North Korean team in South Korea. So it was really a way to reconnect and to work together to reestablish communication, diplomacy between all of them. Obviously, it's a very high political matters. It's a very complex to solve political issue, and especially this one. But it definitely helped to have a dialogue together, to speak the same language, and to not focus on what is dividing the country, but more what is unite the country together. So it's really important. And I will also highlight another example linked to not between the country, but also linked to the topic. And it was what Sophia Liu decided about the gender equality. It's also super important to have in mind that sports diplomacy could definitely help such important topic like gender equality or safeguarding to develop. And for example, I will focus maybe, I will say 2 words about my topic right now of research, which is safeguarding. And actually, during the Olympics and Paralympics in London in 2012, it was super important to keep in mind that a lot of academics, a lot of NGOs, a lot of people gathered together for the Olympics and Paralympics, decided to launch several very important initiatives regarding safeguarding. And they decided to build something really important, which is today very crucial in the way on this topic. So it's also help to do things. And as you mentioned, I'm also working on a global observatory on gender equality in sport based in Lausanne. And it's also super interesting to see also how the link with sports diplomacy is crucial. I will leave the floor here. I will stay at your disposal. Let me mention 2 things. First thing that I enter in the chat about the work that ISCA has done, especially on grassroots sports diplomacy. It was super interesting, and he could definitely give some tools and resources for some stakeholders here in the meeting, but also to have in mind that sports diplomacy may do a lot, but it's also, we have to be very careful about what we want to do with that, and knowing about the objective, evaluate the impact also, which is and it's linked to what Silvija said before. Thank you so much once again for your time and for your attention.
Thank you, Carole. And I think that beautifully summarizes and focuses on the right place, because all of the speakers have shared the empowerment of youth, the power of youth. And moving forward, I think creating safe space for youth would be one of the key areas of focus for Sport for All diplomacy, because if we really want a Sport for All approach to work for a long-term sustainable way, we must keep the sport safe. I cannot stress this enough, because this is also one of my areas of personal passion. I'm mostly known for my work for introducing safeguarding and safe sport for 7 countries across South Asia in my last role as head of safeguarding and social responsibility in the South Asian football. But I think that takes us to the Q&A, and I'm so excited. I have a million questions, and we have an enormous amount of questions asked through the chat box and Q&A. Unfortunately, we cannot go through each of the questions, and we are trying. We also expect the panelists, if you would like to write or address the answers live in the chat box, that is also possible. But I think we start with this question because we had quite a good summary of the government's intervention and the Qatar's supremacy, delivery and legacy actually sets a good example of the government's approach and in growing involvement, and Ambassador Nico has also focused on that, and I'm pretty sure Professor Simon Rofe has some insights to share as well. But this is going to be an open question to the floor. This is asked by Zineb Zaber, asking, considering Morocco's growing investment in global sport diplomacy, from hosting the African Games to co-organizing the 2030 World Cup, how can existing grassroots sports for development initiatives in the country serve as a model for a more inclusive and equitable sport for all diplomacy globally? What mechanisms would you suggest to ensure that these these local efforts inform international policy frameworks rather than being overshadowed by mega event narratives. And after that, we are also going to ask the question from South Africa. I think this is going to be quite interesting because a lot of the conversations are happening around sport for all diplomacy is also grassroots sport. So if any of the panelists are here to answer the question, you would like to have the question, please feel free. I think this could be quite a lot of discussion. Yeah, Professor Simon, I think you would like to go forward, please.
Forgive me, it's such a good question. I wanted to have the opportunity to share a few thoughts. I think particularly understanding how you can translate the examples that we've seen, and we've heard so many of them today from colleagues at the grassroots, from the individual, almost the individual, you know, as a person, how they can take those experiences and make them have a meaningful impact. So it's three things I would recommend for that. One is the power of advocacy. So being able to tell a good story. That's not, you know, about marketing or spin. It's simply being able to articulate what matters. And the voice that really matters there is the people who it's impactful on. So the participants, in all senses of the participants, that might be the youth athlete, but it might be their school teacher who notices within their schoolwork an increased aptitude. Maybe the physiology of being able to do some exercise enables them to concentrate more effectively during a class on, you know, in maths and language. But these are the kind of advocates that you can draw into. Being able to share those, and this is where the network comes in. If you're able to put those parts of it together, then the narrative of that impactful matter, that really helps. And then I think the third thing is to be able to, and we have 200 plus people on this seminar, half a dozen people on the panel, be, you know, a little bit of self-promotion, a little bit of putting things forward. So in the case of Morocco, there's a lot there. There's a lot there that I don't know about. I'm fascinated to learn. So please feel free to reach out. And within that action, we are able to increase the bonds of that network and enable other stories to be told. So the three things in quick fire action.
Thank you, Professor. I think I'm right now sitting in Morocco as we speak, and I definitely incredibly can vouch that the government and the country has enormous potential. And that also takes us to our next question. I think Global South countries are really stepping up. And the question here is that in South Africa, the focus is rather on the elite sport. So how do we bridge that gap, and how do we not just focus on high performance sport, but also change these mindsets towards sport diplomacy through focusing on grassroots sport? I think this is an interesting area where maybe Sophia, you could come up, or Gavin, you could share some experience if you would like.
So for me, thank you again. Thank you for the question. So for me, I think the basic start point is also from the athlete. I mean, for the youth, for the kids, and so usually we don't put our goal very high. The most important, and that is the magical sports. We all have fun together. So when we have the fun together, we can come close, allows distract and conflict. Yeah, so the most important is, I think, focus on the interactions and throw the sports and have the fun. So don't put the goals too high or too far away. Just, you know, for me, for the kids, I say just give them a ball and let's play. Yeah. So that's the first beginning, and then actually, for all of my programs, we don't have a very specific way. For example, our government funded the sport ministry this summer, but we put the sports diplomacy as the main policy in our new ministry. However, we don't have the specific the goal for it. Although we have some studying about diplomacy, but for many people, it's still a very young concept. So that is, but for me, that is a good thing because we can define the definition. So for me, I think we need more actions. I mean, just take actions, and then we put this case together. We can have our path more clear. Yeah.
Gavin, would you like to add some insights from a civil society perspective?
Sure. I would like to make the point that, you know, nobody owns sport. So I think, you know, governments in particular, you know, they should be enablers. They're there to join the stakeholder dots to create the policy frameworks, to, you know, maybe help with funding streams, but they need to bring people together, bring the stakeholders together to have a one nation approach. But I think, you know, South Africa is really, really interesting. We all know about the story from the '95 Rugby World Cup and Mandela and what happened there. But if you fast forward to the present, I look at somebody like Siya Kolisi, the iconic Springbok captain. If you are looking for a sports diplomat, he is your man. He comes from a very humble, very, very humble background. He's very culturally aware. He's always, when he goes to another country to play, he's very respectful of their culture, their language. He's interested in them. When you see him interviewed, he always talks about the country he's in. He's an enabler. So I think people like Siya are a wonderful bridge between the elite level and communities. And I think there will be many, many other people within the South African sporting landscape that can also play that role. So I think, you know, just remembering that, you know, nobody owns sport and everybody can play a really important role, but these iconic people can bridge the gap between the elite and the grassroots.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we are 2 minutes over the time, but we have an amazing set of questions and we would like to ask more questions. So we would, if it's okay with everyone, we would extend to 10 more minutes. And we straight go to the question to Nasser, because I think the success of the Qatar World Cup and the work of Generation Amazing also has shown us that the meaning of the cross-cultural understanding. So the question that has been asked, that what types of sport programs or initiatives are most effective in promoting cross-cultural understanding, Nasser? And you have given examples in the conflict-affected regions, in the vulnerable communities. Would you like to share some more insights, please?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we noticed early on is that, you know, we created a platform which is called the Youth Festival, the Generation Amazing Youth Festival in 2019, alongside the FIFA Clubs World Cup. So the point was that it was a cultural exchange. We wanted to bring youth, obviously, to Doha and around the mega sporting event, but also obviously to give them access to the event. So they got tickets, they went to some of the games. But it was a learning festival. There was a lot of workshops, there was a lot of panel discussions. And the idea is that, you know, we saw the success of the festival, and we continued to run festivals since then. So we did another festival during the FIFA Arab Cup, which focused on, you know, bringing together Arab, youth from all the 21 member, associations that competed in that FIFA tournament. And then obviously in 2022, we kind of created the biggest festival, which brought together delegations, school kids from all the 32 countries that competed in the World Cup. And it was a year-long program. It was a school exchange program where we kind of divided up into 3 phases. Phase 1 was sort of a lot of capacity building online. We had sort of, you know, video messages from, you know, the president of FIFA, for example, Gianni. We had a video message from David Beckham as well, addressing the youth, who was one of our ambassadors, talking to them about, him kind of meeting them in Doha, and then obviously, you know, the role of sports and the role of football in kind of promoting, inclusive communities. And then obviously there was the face-to-face interaction where we brought them over in the lead up to the World Cup. They were here, they attended some of the games. We had an amazing delegation from Wales. We took them to a Wales match as well. I think for them that was a life-changing experience. They loved the experience, but a lot of them, you know, didn't realize that, you know, sports can give them an advantage, and you know, through sports they can learn about different cultures, they can learn about different traditions and stuff like that. So again, part of the festival, what we've done and continue to do is throughout every festival there's an evening where we celebrate different cultures. and we have a stage, and every delegation goes up on the stage and they perform. They can do a dance, they can sing a song, they can recite poetry, for example. To represent their culture, they come in their traditional clothes as well. So I think that became sort of an amazing platform. We did a similar festival. We supported a festival during the Paris Olympics with an amazing organization called Sports dans la Ville last year, and then also during the Women's World Cup in Sydney. We worked with a couple of partners, and we supported a women-focused festival. And we had delegations of youth from the region that were representing their countries in Sydney. And I think, looking at 2026, the next World Cup, we're looking at, again, doing something in Boston with Boston Scores. But I think, again, going back to the role of mega sporting events and youth, I think there's always room for us to do more in terms of youth representation and giving youth opportunities to attend some of these mega sporting events. A lot of them come from marginalized backgrounds and wouldn't be able to kind of pay tickets and can travel, so we support them with that. It's and then we create a network. They go back to their communities. They have amazing friends of, a network of friends in different countries around the world. They continue to engage on social media, and I think the most important thing for us, Fahmida, is we usually are very nervous before the kids or the youth meet each other, but then we realize as soon as they meet each other, they have a lot more in common than they have in differences. And I think that's, again, the power of sport, is that it unites people and brings people together. And you put your differences aside and you decide to engage and kind of looking at sports as a platform to kind of unite again and bring people together. So I think that's one example. We have a lot of these festival reports on our website as well, if anyone is interested to kind of look at the format and how we run them. But this is something that we've seen kind of also in terms of sponsorship coming on board to support the festivals. We've had a lot of sponsors, FIFA sponsors and other sponsors that wanted to kind of support. We had amazing kind of ambassadors, whether it was again David Beckham. A lot of the FIFA legends kind of came out, spoke to the kids, inspired the kids, motivated the kids, and also I think shared their own experiences going through difficulties and challenges when playing sport. So I think that also resonated a lot with a lot of kids that came from underprivileged communities or marginalized communities. So again, I think creating that platform and creating that bringing everybody together and kind of connecting the mega sporting event with youth is very critical for us at GA.
Thank you so much once again. I think that beautifully brings together so many examples, and there is so much of inspirations to take forward, and I'm pretty sure the participants are learning more as they look forward to implementing sport for all diplomacy. We would like to ask Ambassador Nico, because I think the government's perspective is very important for us to understand. How do they take the legacy forward in the community space, in the youth space, and how is your experience in the Winter Olympics 2022? Is there any sport diplomacy legacy that you pick up? It's a question asked by Tony Young. And Jacqueline also asked that if you could tell us more about the way world coaches and curve codes play a role in the sport diplomacy in Netherlands. Would you like to share? Thanks.
Thank you. It doesn't surprise me that Jacqueline is asking this question. First of all, I think that indeed sport is also is about connecting and about inspiring. So what works quite well in the Netherlands, at least, is what we call sports heroes in schools. Kids get very much inspired by sports heroes, and that generates a lot of interesting discussions in school classes as well. And what is very important, I think, is to operate also at the level of neighborhoods. We have a very good experience in the Netherlands with what we call neighborhood coaches. They know very well in their neighborhoods what the composition of the neighborhood population, what types of groups there are in the neighborhoods, and also the specific barriers that could sometimes impede the local population to practice more sports and to do physical exercises. Those can be financial barriers, social barriers, practical barriers, or any type of supports or accompany kids or other groups of the population to be more active and to interact more within their neighborhoods through sports and physical exercise. So that's also something that is very much stimulated by government, also at the local level. So I think that the neighborhoods has a very important role to play there, because they know better than anybody what is necessary to take the next steps. And then indeed we have in our most legendary football player ever was Johan Cruyff. Maybe some might know him. I see some nodding in the audience, and he created this wonderful initiative. Indeed, in terms of legacy, he created his Cruyff Foundation, through which kids, especially both boys and girls, both kids from any background, whatever. Whatever their abilities, so I prefer to talk about abilities instead of disabilities, by the way. So whatever their backgrounds, whatever their conditions, mental, physical, that they can all participate in playing football, and by playing football on what we now call Cruyff courts, that they can also have social interaction and through coaches that are specifically trained in accompanying kids to socially interact with one another. So those Cruyff courts are generally installed in socioeconomic areas that are a little bit more disadvantageous. But it works extremely well because it's a place of encounter, it's a place of bonding. And you see also that parents, family are very much connected. And now they also apply all kinds of new digital innovations in stimulating kids to play football and to play together. I had an experience with that indeed in China, but also in Brazil and in other places. So we have them now also in India. It's a very empowering way of practicing sports, but also being empowered in your life, in your daily life. Through indeed the Olympic, but especially also the Paralympic Games in China and Beijing in 2022, we engaged very much with the Chinese Paralympic Committee and organizing some events, also with other countries, Italy, France, Denmark, Germany, also in exchanging experiences. How do you as a government, but also with the sports movements, engage, stimulate people with disabilities to practice more sports and physical exercises, not necessarily to become a Paralympic champion, but very much at grassroots level, stimulating sports for all.
Thank you. I think we are at the very end of our question and answer, and we keep getting these wonderful questions. I think it's a conversation in progress, but we would like to ask our last question to Carole to give us from a research and more academic perspective of it, because there is a term called sports washing that has been coined in the research spaces, in the social media. We see that the term is often coined to narrate that repressive governments in countries where there are documented human rights abuses happening, they use sports to clean their images. So the question comes from Michael, asking that how can we make sure we ensure that we adhere to the principle of do not harm with our engagement on sport for all diplomacy? What do you think, Carole?
I really think that we will need to organize a new complete seminar to properly question, but maybe a few things. The first thing is, as you mentioned, sports washing was a keyword, a buzzword developed not by academics, but by Human Rights Watch. It was in 2013, if I'm correct. It was addressed to define the strategy of Azerbaijan, developed at this time. But it raised a very important question, and also the way we look at initiative developed by countries. So indeed, the question of Michael is really key and really important to always have in mind what is behind such initiative. So the idea, my answer will be in two things. First thing, that in my opinion, we have to be very careful about the word safe sport washing, because it's way too often used, and so it's somehow depolitize the concept. So we have to be very cautious by using it, but indeed it's very important concept, and we have to be aware of its dimension. And regarding the other question, and how to make sure that we ensure the principle do not harm, and to do not use sport for washing reason. The idea will be to maybe always have in mind, always have a critical analysis. Whatever sports diplomacy develop all the time, it's linked to political, economical, social reason. So we also need to practice this look, and yeah, as I mentioned, it will be way too easy and way too to answer by a yes or no question, and to point out some people or some country. I really think that we will need to have another proper conversation, to really go deeper in this crucial topic, because as you mentioned, Michael, it's a very important issue, and I think that it deserves more than 2 minutes by this censor.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are at the very end. Thank you all for joining us today. Before we close, we would like to announce that the next webinar series organized by Fafisa would be in June, and we will be talking about championing inclusion through the media. We hope to see you all, and we have a post-webinar survey, which takes only a minute to fill out. Please fill this. Before we finish, if we could have one liner, just one line from each of our speakers as your message for sport for all diplomacy, what would be that message for all of you? I start with Professor Salmon, and then go to Sophia, Gavin, Nasser, Nico, and Carole, as I see in my screen. Professor Salmon.
Thank you. Brevity is not the quality of many academics, but the simple message I would give is be inclusive in our discussions. Include all of the different actors across the sportscape, whatever they look like, and probably people who we don't know yet. Think about who's next in the conversation.
Sophia.
I think that's tough, because for me, sport is for fun. Sports of diplomacy is for a better world. Yeah.
Gavin. You are on mute.
Apologies. Just building on what Simon said, be inclusive, make sure you bring together all of the actors and stakeholders. And one group that we haven't mentioned, of course, is sports fans. We have a term in Wales we call diplomats in bucket hats, but that's basically all about fans being diplomats on the streets and engaging with people and building warm ties with people. So yeah, be inclusive.
Awesome.
All voices, all abilities, one team. So I think the emphasis there is on inclusion, shared humanity, and the need to take action as well. Thank you.
Siddhar. Nico, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the previous comment made me think that when we measure impact of sports, you see very often happiness and passion and collective identity and pride. But I would very much, for me, sports is this sense of togetherness and a sense of strength. So I would say stronger together.
And lastly, Carole.
Complicated to finish this one, but I will say that yeah, sports diplomacy evolved enormously during the last decades, so it's really important to keep pushing and keep thinking about the next evolution, and the next evolution will be with all of us. So yeah, it's definitely a way to see the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As we wrap it up, we have our last engagement with all of you. We would like to hear your reflection through a Mentimeter. If we could have it on the screen, please. Please let us know what's your thought on have you and your organization have ever used sport to help people or communities talk across differences. And because I think our beginning of the questions suggested lack of awareness, lack of resources, lack of structure, and all of those were wonderfully covered during our panel. And as we end the panel, we hear from our experts, we beautifully summarize all of those guiding questions that we started off with. And we would like to know if your organization has ever used sport to help people in communities. Please join through the Mentimeter, and I can see it's a resounding yes, and some of more other mixed answers coming, but it's 92% yes. As we can see, our next question would be, which aspect do you think is the most powerful aspect of sport for all in promoting diplomacy? Is it encouraging dialogue and understanding? Is it strengthening social inclusion? Or is it empowering marginalized groups, creating neutral space for engagement, showcasing international cooperation? We are intrigued to hear what our participants think, because this has been one of the most engaging number of participants, not just in terms of the number, but also the quality. We could have the buzzing questions and very interactive chat to follow through Zoom. We really enjoyed having all of you as audience. And I believe the speakers can also say the same. So thank you all once again for your wonderful inputs and insights. We look forward to have you joining in our next webinar by Tafisa. Finally, I just want to thank all of our speakers, panelists, colleagues here at Tafisa, and most importantly, our audience today. Thank you so much for attending and your active participation. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Goodbye.